All right, welcome to Sunday Letters. I'm Larry Maguire, psychologist and writer and lecturer and all that kind of stuff. Writing over on sundayletters.larrygmaguire.com and welcome along. It's been a little while. The podcast has taken a substantial break, um, probably well over a year now since the last episode, but in recent times I felt the urge to get this going again, to relaunch, to throw some additional energy into it and getting a hand with that. If you're watching on YouTube, that good-looking man to my left or my right is Dmitri Belikov. He's joining me here on the podcast. You'll find out more about Dmitri and myself on sundayletters.larrygmaguire.com, and the link is below the video if you're watching on YouTube. Also in the show notes of the episode, wherever you happen to be listening to that, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, all major podcast platforms will have every episode. Now, I should say in advance, there are probably, I think, 280 episodes or something like that. A lot of it is rubbish, right? A lot of it, the early stuff, is really slapstick, thrown together, done on the fly. It was recorded on Anchor. Some of you, maybe who are familiar with podcasting, will know that Anchor was in recent years acquired by Spotify. So Anchor Podcasts is now Spotify Podcasts. So a lot of the early stuff was created using Anchor. Anchor was a great little kind of community platform, but it grew and it expanded and it was subsequently acquired. So a lot of those older episodes, they might be interesting, they might not. Some of it is really crap, and some of it is, kind of hits on some interesting topics. So you might find it interesting. But so we can consider this a relaunch. We consider it a rebrand to some extent, reinvigoration of these ideas around work. And that's essentially what Sunday Letters is all about. It's about examination of our human relationship with work, the container within which we go to work, be it capitalism, mainly capitalism for most of us. We work within a capitalist system. And what that means for you and me in terms of being free, working free, choosing work of our own design, of our own say-so, getting up when we want, doing what we want, making commitments, because going to work, doing what it is we do requires us to make commitments to others, regardless of whether we're working for ourselves or working directly for other people under direct employment. When we go to work, we generally commit to doing something and doing it by a certain time, under certain conditions. We come to an arrangement. Now, the difference between working for yourself and working for other people is that there's a greater degree of control over those parameters when you go to work, how long you work, when you take your holidays, how long your holidays are, how much you earn. When you go to work for other people, they decide what you earn. They decide what I earn, what we earn. So we'll talk about all of that. Um, pardon me. So Sunday Letters, the newsletter, the articles that we write, is all about work and the human relationship at work. The podcast as well, and the YouTube videos that are associated with that. So, in recent times, I felt, right, let's get this thing going again. Had a chat with my good friend Dmitri Belikov, a philosopher based in Tallinn, in Estonia. And these are the topics that we get talking about all the time, chatting over on Discord or on text or whatever happens to be. So we decided to do some work together on it and see what we can produce. See if we can build the subscribers to this newsletter, to this podcast, build out interest for what we're doing, and just get into it and get stuck in and get our hands dirty. So, Dmitri, a long intro, but welcome along, and thanks for agreeing to come along and join me on this a collaborative effort, really in the spirit of doing work that's driven by personal interest, right? So you and I are here. Say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, Larry. Hi, listen to all those who listen to us right now. Well, my name is Dmitri, as you mentioned before. I live in Tallinn. Actually, I was born and grew up in Estonia, northeast of Europe, basically, on the border with Russia, Finland, Sweden. So in the 2010, in the aftermath of financial crisis, I lost my job in Estonia and I didn't see any future prospects for my living here.
Yeah,
Uh,
welcome to the club, by the way. 2010, dramatic
yeah,
period, wasn't it, for
I think
for a lot
yeah,
of
it
people?
was everywhere like this. Yeah, but
Yeah.
for some reason, I thought at the time that there is this country, abroad that have the sole prosperity and will allow me to grow and stuff like
Mm.
this. And so I decided to move abroad, basically. So when I moved to Ireland in 2010,
So
well,
hang on a second. Hang on a second, right? You came to Ireland, right? The IMF had just arrived in on our doorstep and imposed these major restrictions on and austerity on the country.
yeah,
Were you crazy? Like,
exactly. That was my thought that nothing. It's only happened in Estonia, all this financial crisis and stuff. But yeah, eventually it was an island as well. But I
yeah,
was too naive at the time, and so as you said, it's like I couldn't find any job either
yeah.
there, in Ireland. So I was making, walking around the city every day, like trying to
Whatever you
find
could get,
anything.
yeah,
Yeah, just to make a living. And yeah, eventually I found a job, but they were just dirty jobs, even kitchen porter's position, just to keep myself going, keep myself
yeah.
living. And yeah, and eventually, I changed some position, just went higher and higher, so to speak, until I eventually in 2013, I got hired by this multinational corporation of a worldwide known company. And it was a bliss for me, the pinnacle of happiness in a
Yeah,
sense, because it's a white collar job. I mean, you sit in the office, you have a computer in front of you, like
yeah.
what else can you dream of?
So what happened? What happened?
Yeah, well, then initially it started well. I mean, but probably for a couple of months, to be honest, like after half a year, I think I already started to notice something wrong, something that I don't belong here, in this place. And I couldn't figure out firstly, like what was it. And I spent a couple of more years when I realized what was wrong, and I get back to it later. Um, and so the stage halfway through my career in this company, I decided that I need to do something with my life
Mm,
because I didn't see myself anymore working in this company. And at that time, I already started to think about probably it's not this particular company, but any company at all, like in the world with the same structure. And I assume that they have pretty much similar structure everywhere within the companies
mm,
nowadays. And so what I saw there, the first is it's just how dull, boring this job was in a sense. So it doesn't allow you to contribute anything, at all, like your creativity, your thinking, your judgment. Even if they write in the job description section that you must possess all the skills like
mm,
creativity, decision making,
mm.
thinking out of the box. In reality, it was all bullshit.
Right.
Forgive me my French.
Mm,
So, but yeah, because most of the time you're sitting there, it's like a conveyor belt. You're just doing one specific task. You don't basically alter this task, change in any meaningful way. You just go by the book, and that's basically it.
right.
Uh,
I'm sure they
Also,
offered you opportunities to kind of advance your career and all this kind of stuff, did they?
yeah, but that was the problem with me because yeah, you can grow up within the company as they promise you, but what I realized that basically every promotion led to the same kind of job, basically
Right.
changed. What was changing only the picture, basically the task, the main task, but in a nutshell it was the same dull, boring, routine job
Mm,
with little or no decision making at all, with no creativity involved in the work process. And so, and the other point, I realized it just later on. For me, I started from this dullness and boredom, and then I saw the meaninglessness of everything that surrounded me at the time, starting from countless team meetings that didn't achieve anything at all. Like you just waste your time there, and there is no definite conclusion like what we wanted to achieve, and in some cases it never was achieved in the end, you know.
Mm.
And then and then I looked at the broader picture that what am I doing here? Because every time I wake up, I go to my work and spend like 8 hours there, and I don't contribute anything meaningful to society, you know, in a sense. So I go there, I sit, I'm doing this boring, dull task. I feel no satisfaction whatsoever. I feel depressed in the end by the end of the workday, and exhausted in a sense. Not exhausted because I'm tired of the job, but because I'm exhausted of the boredom. You know,
Yeah.
your brain just exhausted in a sense. You just can't think of anything. All you want, you just go to the shop, buy some probably beer, and go home and just forget about your day
That
completely. You know.
that's a really interesting point to make, is that the fact the boredom was wearing you down and wearing you out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's some people say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I made a hard job probably today." I say, "No, it's not the job you did. It's just pure
Yeah.
boredom. You just sit there doing the same task all over again, repetitive, boring, dull stuff, and that's it. You don't engage. You are not engaged mentally in what you're doing. You know,
Mm.
you don't connect your creativity, your capacities, you know, as a human being, you know, to this
Mm.
process.
So that's as distinct from being tired from actually exerting yourself and doing something like, I don't know, planting a garden or farming
Yeah, exactly.
vegetables
At least
or
you see,
mm,
at least you, you know, express yourself in that. You see the result. You see that you
okay.
made something. But here, you see that all you're doing is just basically nothing. You know, it doesn't have any meaning for you. And uh, and then again, you can sort of broaden up this meaningless on the whole corporation and all, like, because the corporation doesn't contribute anything in my opinion to society as well, because all they looking for is profit, you know.
Right.
They don't give anything of value to society, and you basically you're a part of it, and that kind of bothered me as well.
Mm.
And so yeah, I decided to apply halfway through to psychology course. uh, yeah, that's where we met,
That's
Larry.
where we met, yeah. And
Yeah,
my story is uh my story ran parallel with yours, because you're still telling your tale, but just to kind of it mirrors my own experience in that, although I was working for myself, 2010, 2009, economic crash, things go tits up. What next? And I'm kind of at a loose end. Business has disappeared, and I'm browsing the internet. I'm trying to find where I belonged in the world anymore. It was like, what am I supposed to do? I don't do this anymore. The thing that I've spent 12, 15 years building is just gone pop. So what do I do now? So I'm searching the internet. I find this course, psychology degree. It sounds interesting. I'll sign up for that. So you did the same.
yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, psychology, it was a breath of fresh air for me. It's something different because I realized that I didn't like all this financial stuff, you know, everything related to money. It's
Mm,
just not my piece of cake anyway.
yeah.
And so, yeah, after psychology, we graduated, and I decided to take a course in philosophy. And yeah, that's pretty much it, I suppose. And I returned now back to Estonia after I finished my degree in 2022, and I'm still unemployed. I tried to find the job
Mm,
here, but uh, there were a couple of them I tried, but I basically quit. One job I quit after 2 weeks because it's just I realized that I'm back to the same place.
same place. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember one of my friend told me that she changed actually the company, and another company was had a better environment in a sense. But yeah, and I trusted her to some degree. I tried it, but no, it's not. In a nutshell, they are all the same,
Mm.
and I just couldn't. I mean, couldn't make it there.
And so here we are.
Yeah,
And I've been doing my best to convince you. I don't know, maybe you don't need convincing, but uh, I would suggest that there are a particular cohort of people, men, women, across the planet, in maybe in the northern hemisphere, working in this kind of in developed nations for organizations and so on, that really don't fit, that are what you might refer to as unemployable,
yeah,
and the work environment is just so alien to what makes us tick that it's impossible for us to fit in there. And when we try to, it invariably leads to a reduction in our health and our psychological health, and as well as our physical health. And I would argue that that's the case for most people, but most people simply put up with it,
yeah,
that we endure this environment because we have to, because
yeah,
society, how we have constructed it, tells us that we need to earn a living, so to speak, that we need to prove ourselves, and that on a planet, on this planet, there's no other planet that we know of, that we've got to earn our keep, and that we almost have to earn our right to live. And if we don't earn our right to live, well, then we barely get enough to, or obtain enough to survive. And I
yeah,
think there's something fundamentally wrong with that. So here we are, and we're going to try and figure this out. I don't know if we can figure it out ultimately, but the intention is for you and I to bounce these ideas, these various ideas around capitalism, socialism, the modern workplace, the pursuit of happiness, so to speak. You and I had a brief discussion on the relevance of that word, and maybe that's a topic for another episode, right? Um, Bertrand Russell, Bertrand Russell spoke extensively about happiness and the meaning of happiness and so on. There's loads of authors have written on this material. But from a technical scientific perspective, it's probably not a very helpful word. But from the perspective of living your life, we can say that everybody's kind of looking for happiness. So we'll examine that in a future episode, and how we might be able to work with a large degree of freedom at things that interest us and turn us on and engage us, and make a living, make a few quid doing it, because that's what we've decided. That's how we've decided society works, through exchange of tender of money. Um, I suppose to elaborate on my background a little bit, just for listeners who are unfamiliar with what we're doing. So I left school when I was 15. This is kind of shorthand. So left school when I was 15. Was told that I was going to that I needed to go and take a job that I was offered. My father had been in management in a construction firm, and said, "We have a job for you." After me working a few summers making tea and going to the shop for lads, 13, 14. So I was 15. He came home. He said, "We've got a job for you. Got an apprenticeship for you." I enjoyed school. I was decent enough in school, sharp enough, average enough, I suppose. But my main focus was football. I loved to play football, and things were happening. And I thought, well, if I'm in school, well, I'll get to play lots of football and I'll get to play for my club. But it didn't work out anyway. I had to take the job. I was told, under threat of violence from my late mother, that I was taking the job and that was it, right? So I took the job, um, did the best I could at it. Turned out I was reasonably good. I've always been interested in figuring stuff out and making stuff and using these things here in the real world, to make things and fix things and do this, that, and the other. So uh, it wasn't completely alien to me. I managed to fit in quite well, and I did okay. Finished a 4-year apprenticeship shortly after that. Left the country, came back, and then after a year or two more, I was 25. I decided to start a business, because for the same reasons you left your job, I left my job. I was tired of being pushed around. I was tired of being told what to do. I was tired of being expected to do shitty work. I was tired of other people that I was promoted to a, I don't know what it was, foreman or whatever it was. I was tired of other people working for me, doing shitty work. So I thought, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm going to go out and steer my own boat. I'm going to make something for myself, win or lose. I'm just going to give it a go. So I did. And I borrowed 5 grand from the bank and I bought a van and I got to work. And within about a year, I paid back that 5 grand and I had another bunch of money in the bank. So I thought, this is brilliant. Um, this is exactly what I wanted to do. So, with the nature of it being, it got busier. I hired more people. Uh, so it was no longer than just me, and that's when the trouble kind of started because now I had to manage people again, and managing people is very different to managing yourself because now they come to you with all of their idiosyncrasies and ways of working and so on, and in large part, it doesn't matter. Um, it doesn't matter how much direction you give. I might be guilty of contradicting myself now in a later conversation we have, but people. Anyway, I found it problematic trying to manage people, put it in shorthand. And so as the thing got bigger, it became more uncontrollable. And then that was all right because you got by. But then 2008, 9 came along, the shit hit the fan, and the business failed because we were too heavily exposed financially. We had bought too many vehicles. I mean, we had so many loans and leases out on vehicles and property and so on in order to expand and grow. We were screwed because work was going like that, nice and steady, even a bit of growth. And then 2008, 2009, boom, it was like it went off the edge of a cliff and suddenly there was no more work. So we couldn't keep the people, we couldn't keep the vehicles, we couldn't keep the property. Myself and my business partner split up. He went his way, I went mine. Tried to keep the wheels going for a few more years. Stumbled along 20 up to 2015, was it 16? And then I signed up for that course, same course as you did. And then I let it all off. I decided to close the business and I got a job. So I went from uh, employee to being self-employed to being an employer to now being an employee again. And I found it incredibly frustrating working for other people because there was no degree of control over how the work was done. I had no influence over how the work was done. Everyone was set in their ways, and this is how they worked, and I couldn't fit into that. So I handed in my notice, I finished the project, handed in my notice 9 months later, and I went back to being a sole trader, just working for myself. And I did that for a number of years while I continued to study. I went on and did a master's in work and organizational psychology, learned about how the whole system of HR works in those corporate environments that you were speaking about earlier on. And critically, I discovered that work psychology, organizational psychology, they call it IO psychology in the United States, they call it occupational psychology in the UK. So it's got all these names. It's essentially the psychology of people and the behavior of people at work. So I figured out, I realized in doing that course and subsequently teaching that material that the workplace uses psychology in order to get what they want from their people, to manipulate the situation. Now, individual work psychologists are honorable and ethical in their work, right? But the organizations that they work for are not. And like you said, for-profit organizations exist to make a profit. If they don't make a profit, they die. So their fundamental, the fundamental ethos, the fundamental reason for being is to be profitable, to make money. Their objective is an abstract one. It's to be profitable. And everyone that works for that organization is a tool or a means by which that organization can be profitable. So if their people, of course, they're interested in their people being productive and their performance being high and all of this kind of stuff. But if you're not, you get sacked. Now, there might be a reason why you're not productive, right? Or performing well. In which case, HR, organizational psychologists, people like me will begin to analyze the situation. We will execute we'll gather data, we'll perform analysis, We'll try to find out where the weak points are in the organization. We'll try and bring in learning and development, another wing of HR to help people grow and develop, and that's all great. But ultimately, its end is towards making people more productive, and that's its goal. And people can be sacrificed in the pursuit of that goal, and often are. The environment is sacrificed, people are sacrificed, and this is the inherent problem. Joel Bakan, a law lecturer, professor of law in Montreal, I think, is it? You know this book and the movie, Corporation.
Oh yeah. I think it has a second part now.
Yeah, the
Couple of
new
years ago.
Corporation.
Yeah.
I've got both of the books here, and I've watched the first movie. Haven't seen the second one yet. But essentially, Joel Bakan writes extensively on the nature of corporations, for-profit corporations, and concluded that for-profit corporations are inherently psychopathic
Mm.
in their behavior. And if you were to analyze their behavior the same way as you would analyze an individual undergoing therapy or otherwise, or assessment, psychological assessment, if you were to examine a corporation in the same way, it would essentially, given the evidence, show that corporations are psychopathic in the pursuit of their aims. Now, what is a corporation? Only a conglomerate, like a collective of people, and a very small minority of people who run the show.
Yeah.
So the behavior of the organization surely is reflective of the people who run it. So by conclusion, or by extension, the people who run the organization are inherently psychopathic in and of themselves. Now, I know you can be accused of making a big leap there, but it's not unreasonable to suggest that that may be the case. And when you look at leadership and you look at the components of leadership, the personality traits of leadership, and those who run organizations, they're very high on these, what are referred to as dark personality traits of Machiavellianism, narcissism, sadism, and psychopathy. The dark tetrad. That's a topic for another episode in the future. So you see, here's what we're faced with. We have this environment. I'm after leaving. So my story kind of starts, as far as Sunday Letters is concerned, and this material and this content that you and I are talking about. It starts with realizing that, for me at least, that the workplace is a fake plastic environment that ultimately makes people sick. It's a fake plastic environment where we take living, breathing organisms like you and me and everyone else, and we place them in this environment and we expect them to flourish. How does that work? If most corporations, according to Joe Bakan, are psychopathic, how can you take living, breathing, caring organisms like human beings, put them into that environment and expect them not to take on those? We know that that's nonsense. We know through the studies of learned helplessness and Stanley Milgram's studies of obedience to authority, and we know through Zimbardo's prison experiment, and we know through umpteen others experiments, and Martin Seligman has worked in positive psychology and so on, that you take people and you put them in a detrimental, damaging environment, that it's going to have a negative effect. And you can go in there. It's like going into a war zone and taping up people and sending them back into, giving them their gun and sending them back into war. That's what it's okay. It might be an extreme analogy to use, but it's true. And so the work of the likes of me, work psychologists, organizational psychologists, is a nonsense. I'm not buying into it. So maybe some people would argue with me. Maybe they feel like they're doing good work, but I don't think it has a lasting effect. The only true way, I believe, to be healthy in your work is to create and direct your own work. I don't know. What's your view on this?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, yeah, I think I don't know. I remember now that probably I told you when you just started your course that probably it's not a good idea, but it's yeah, probably you need to change the philosophy as
But
well.
here's the thing about that, right? That conversation we had. I thought to myself, well, I realize that I'm going into the belly of the beast here doing this, but maybe it'll give me greater insight into how this all works. And it has. So in that sense, it was of benefit because I can see how the mechanisms of this big machine operate.
Yeah,
Uh, Even if the lecturers and professors and all the rest of it that deliver this content can't see it themselves,
yeah.
you know?
Well, probably they're obsessed with their topics, you know. That. And by the way, getting back to organizational psychology, you mentioned that most of their job is to create all those plans, learning and development plans to uh, sort of fix a person to make him more productive.
Yeah,
And actually, I went through this through my experience actually, because but what this plan is basically, what this plan means basically is you go there. If you're not productive enough, you just given time, let's say months. If you not do it, if you don't fix yourself,
yeah,
well, if you do not motivate yourself, not
yeah,
somebody else but yourself,
mm,
so you basically fired. And
yeah.
so all these elaborate plans, they probably work somewhere in abstraction, but in reality you are given an option. Either you fix yourself and work, or you don't fix yourself and you're out of this place.
And here's you talk about motivation. That's another topic that we can touch on.
Yeah.
And what people will find through these conversations that there's a large degree of overlap in the content that we're in these conversations because we're really talking about the same problem in the workplace with the modern problem at work. We could be guilty maybe of thinking it was always this way, but it wasn't. We'll talk about David Graeber and his work, Bullshit Jobs. That's another content topic. Um, but you mentioned something there. What was it? Oh yeah, motivation. And so, um, how does one motivate oneself? How does that happen? That's like,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and
how do you do that?
for me, honestly, nothing helped actually. Well, one of the motivation, I don't know, probably it was a fault of the team leaders and stuff like that. But the only motivation I heard was like, you getting paid. That's the only motivation. But I mean, like that doesn't motivate me
Mm,
in any sense. Well, but they couldn't provide any other motivation for that.
mm.
I mean, you getting
Here's,
money, you get your bills paid.
yeah.
That's the
What more
story.
do
I
you
mean,
want?
yeah, if you
Mm,
don't have this job, that means you basically don't have enough resources to cover your basic needs and stuff like this.
yeah,
So it's all structured, and the basis of the structure is basically fear, anxiety, and fear. You know, nothing
good
else.
point. Yeah. There's an analogy here with sport. You know, my son is big into soccer. He follows soccer quite a bit, and my dad would be into soccer as well. And you know, we'd look at games on the telly, the Champions League, and so on. And you see, apparently great teams underperforming, um, and players who are on millions a year, and they're getting paid millions to go and play sport. And then you hear people say, and I've been guilty of saying it myself in the past, these people are on millions. Look how poor they're supposed to be professionals. Why can they not produce the goods? You know, how can they play so bad when they have all the resources and they have all the money and they have all the everything that they need to perform well and they still can't perform well? And really, this is in line with what you just said. Is a misunderstanding about what motivates the organism to perform and to do what it does. So that's, you said, fundamental, right? That's a big that's what's going on in the workplace.
Yeah, but then I remember I came across this book. I think it was Jonathan Haidt, this psychologist, you know, from
Yeah, I know
United
him. Yeah.
States. Yeah,
Mm,
I think a social psychologist, and he was saying like money can motivate you to some degree if it's like physical, mindless job in a sense, you know.
yeah.
And I was thinking like, try to compare my duties in this particular workplace. And I said, well, it's also mindless, but why money doesn't motivate me? I mean, so well when it should be, you know. And I think it's probably, you know, uh, individual stuff. I mean, it works for somebody, but it didn't work for me in a sense. That's what conclusion I came to. Well,
Yeah,
we'll see.
I delivered a number of modules on this topic, and there's the evidence suggests that where the task is simple, process oriented, and the individual is proficient and learned and skilled at this process, they know it. If you give them a bonus to produce more, they can produce more. So they just go faster because they know the sequence of how this is done. Like say working on a conveyor belt, putting electronics together and packaging
Yeah.
them up and moving them on, right? So you give someone a bonus to produce more, they're going to produce more. Same way as in a similar way, if you put a camera on them and you monitor their performance and you say you have to produce 100 or 200, whatever it is, of these a day. And so they know they're being watched, and so they'll perform better at that task. Because thinking in terms of Daniel Kahneman, System 1 and System 2, uh, System 1 operates automatically. We train it to do whatever it does, and then it goes, and it's biased and all the rest of it. So System 1 can perform that task faster. But if there's novelty involved, if the task involves creativity or innovation or some degree of thinking and creating something new or solving a problem, throwing a bonus at somebody doesn't work. In fact, it has a detrimental effect on their
Yeah.
performance. Their performance will drop because of the pressure and anxiety and stress. I must do this. I must get this done. So money can motivate, but only to an extent and under certain conditions, after
Yeah.
which it fails to produce the goods. And for some people, I would say for most people, if all their financial needs were met, this is a great question, actually. And so it's a question that we have in the survey that we're running. Remember, I showed it to you recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
If all your financial needs were met, how would you spend your time?
That's a good question. I'll probably for one of our episodes in the future, because there is, well, I asked some people, my friends and relatives, what do they think about this question as well? And seems like opinions start to deviate here. Some people will, I suggest that people will find something to entertain themselves with, to do
Yeah,
something, but some people suggest, well, argue that people probably will do nothing, just sits there watching Netflix and stuff like this,
yeah.
well, and it will be interesting to kind of develop this idea of like, what would it be, if we
I think
had,
that
had this opportunity.
I think that sitting around watching TV will only last for so long before you just get uneasy and uncomfortable and
Yeah,
understimulated. I think most people watch telly, watch Paramount Plus, Netflix, Amazon Prime, blah, blah, to get away from the reality of their experience,
yeah,
throw
yeah,
themselves into some kind of uh, dreamland or fantasy land for a little while.
yes, yeah, but it's a topic for further discussion, future
Yeah, so
discussion.
that's where we're going. Um, so want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching this episode or listening to this episode, checking out the article. A couple of reminders where to get this material. Check the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're listening on a podcast platform like Apple or Spotify. You'll see it in the notes. Couple of links. Sundayletters.larrygmaguire.com. That's where you can read this material. That's where you can listen to new episodes. That's where you can watch these video clips. You can also subscribe for free. If you want to upgrade your subscription, you can do that for $5 a month. And you help uh, Dmitri and I create the time to do this work here. And we think it's important. Hopefully you do too. And we're going to get into the meat of this topic. It's a broad array of topics, I suppose, under the term work or daily work. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to find out how we might command and control our own work and make a reasonable living at it. Sundayletters.larrygmaguire.com, newsletter, podcast, video as well. And hopefully we'll see you there. Any final words, Dimitri, before we split?
I suppose you said it all. Yeah, well, thanks everybody for listening us, and we'll see you next time then.
We'll see you next time. Thanks a million. Okay. Sayonara.